Well, here we are at week 10, beginning at the end of our journey together. Uh, when I was, I remember when I first started being interested in doing church work, I guess, being a pastor, whatever. I remember that there was a piece of advice about preaching, and it had to do with kind of the old model of 3-point sermons. But the advice was, in a sermon, tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. There are your 3 points. And even though that's not quite what I want to do today, or in this unit, I always find it helpful at the end of a class to sort of revisit where we've been. I think in the very first time, I kind of told you what I was going to tell you or what we were going to be talking about. And then we've spent 8 weeks doing that kind of work. And so I would just like to sort of take the opportunity to sort of look back at where we've been and what we all have done, what you all have done. But you'll remember that we started out addressing dreams. The whole theme of this class has been different dreams that we in congregations don't all have the same ideas, the same hopes, the same dreams, even though we may sit in the same pew. What we want, what we desire, what we hope for can be quite different. So we explored dreams, your dreams, and we talked about that. And then the next week, we started working on your Patronus, and you introduced them to one another, and what you thought you might get out of them, and why you chose those, and you interacted with each other, and that was great. Then we moved into 7 weeks that were focused on those 7 canonical areas. We talked about Scripture. We talked about history or ecumenism. Then we moved into kind of technical theology, where we talked about interreligious work and the tension between sort of a call to evangelize and yet an apparent call to be with people who are different than we are. Then we started to apply some of that stuff. Those first 3 weeks were, the scripture, tradition, and reason weeks. Then there was this fulcrum week when we talked about moral theology, and you had the opportunity to reflect on issues about creation and how that sort of the theology of creation and how that spun itself out in some environmental issues. And then after that, we turned to to another triad, as you will, the prophet and the priest and the pastor triad. And so we worked in terms of how we spin out some of that theology on real, on the ground issues. And you chose to either work on immigration or minimum wage. Following that, we had discussion on the priest side, the worship side, and how do we address different dreams in our communal time together when we gather to praise, to pray, to celebrate. What does that going to look like? And then the last assignment was clearly the pastor side, and with the context of a very, very troubling situation in your congregations, and how are you going to address that? So that's been the 9 weeks that we have spent together coming up to this point. It's been a time of reflection, a time of exploration, conversation. But that's where we've been. There have been different types of assignments. You've had to teach classes. You've had to address congregation. You've had to address convention. You've had to be out there in front of the wider public. Lots of different formats, lots of different audiences and assignments. And you'll recall that I did that. I was conscious about that and um, admitted that very upfront because I believe, and as I've talked with other people about this, they sort of nod their head. Yeah, after you get out of seminary, after you get out of any kind of academic institution, unless you go into a writing career or unless you find yourself in a position where you are writing essays for some purpose or another, you don't have to write essays in the congregation, other than maybe a newsletter. But that's not quite the same thing as an 8-page essay talking about the development of the history of the Trinity, as if you could do that in 8 pages. But so I gave you opportunities to stretch your wings in a lot of different ways. That said, for those of you who will need to sit down and write ordination exams, they don't generally ask for PowerPoint presentations. But I imagine, and I believe that you are all um, smart and capable enough to think through the kind of questions that you might be asked, and or even take the kinds of things that you have done in this class and say, okay, well now I know how to write an essay about that. That you can make that translation and hopefully see how the practicality, the practical side of what you would be called upon to do in a ministry situation might be translated into the kind of essay that you'll be asked to write. If you don't know this already, you can go back. All of the ordination exams for about the last 10 years are online. You can go back and see exactly the kinds of questions. You might see where I got some of the ideas for what I came up with. But I clearly took them in different directions. So that's kind of a look past. I told you at the beginning what I would tell you. We told each other, and now I'm telling you again what we've done. And so I want to move into some other things as we move forward here and get to an assignment. It shouldn't be too onerous. You've already done all of the work. And I know you've got other classes. Most of you have other classes and things that you're working on. So this last week's work should not be too terribly bad.